Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. David Barnett, who is an author, speaker, and small business advisor. And I want to thank him for making time to hang out with me today. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to know that for one short moment, I really am the man
You
on
are,
the show.
you are the man on the show. You're probably the man outside of the show too, right? Now, I was getting ready for today, and I was scouring through your website and all the information on you, and I read that you started off with the yellow pages, and I kind of chuckled because I haven't seen yellow pages in a minute now, but you said it taught you some valuable lessons. So I want to start with that. What did you learn from selling the yellow pages?
Yeah, well, the yellow pages was a really important contrast in my development in learning about business because I just graduated from business school.
Mm-hmm.
And in business school, you're doing like case studies about if you were the president of the Fortune 500 company, how would you decide to enter the foreign market and all this kind of stuff. And how many of us are really going to do that? Like not many, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I was working for the Yellow Pages, my job was to go and speak with the owners and managers of real everyday, what I call Main Street businesses. So the person who owns the tire shop, the guy who has the muffler place, the woman who owns the paint store, and find out the next time the phone rings, who do you want it to be? Or who do you want to have walk through the front door of your business? And what makes sense for you? So I had to understand their business model in order to understand if it made sense for them to have, the biggest ad they could to drive the most traffic, or if, maybe that wasn't what they needed. Maybe they needed a much smaller ad, but maybe they needed to be in more than one city. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got to learn about how their business worked and what kinds of customers they wanted in order to really make a recommendation that was going to pay off for them. Because our philosophy was that we didn't want to run an ad for a year. We wanted to gain a client for 10 years. And eventually, I saw Google and all these things coming. I got out of it because I knew that the future wasn't so rosy for that big phone book. But boy, did I learn a lot of stuff while I was talking with those people.
Okay. Do you think it's better off for businesses now that the phone book is gone? Or, I mean, I know technology brings a lot of good things, but also there's some sort of negative things on the other end. But do you think that businesses are benefiting?
Well, let me tell you, there was this one guy who he was an early adopter of online advertising. So,
Okay.
if you were one of the first people on Google AdWords, it didn't cost you very much to advertise.
Mm-hmm.
Way back then, 10 years ago, probably. And he said, you know what, with the internet, we won't have to pay your crazy fees to advertise in the Yellow Pages. We'll all be able to advertise our businesses for free.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I met with the people who were my Yellow Page clients, I would sit with them. Sometimes I would meet with them 2 or 3 times if we were making an advertisement that had to be changed. And so they invested a few hours a year, and then they paid the price of the ad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all they had to invest to advertise their business. And for a lot of small businesses in most cities, the Yellow Pages is a big thing. And then maybe they do some newspaper and radio from time to time. But they were able to get that decision out of the way once every year. And
Okay.
now, if somebody really does want to try to advertise their business for free, quote unquote, on the internet, boy, does it ever take a lot of
It's
time.
consistent. It's consistent. I know
You
with my own
know,
personal brand, it's just a consistent daily, time-consuming kind of thing. So yeah, I can understand. I can see that. Now you mentioned when you were talking about the yellow pages, something that I kind of chuckled at. But your time in business school, you said that in your blurb on your bio that you had to unlearn everything that you had taught in business school, which is like a interesting concept. But what did you
mm.
have to unlearn?
Well, the whole mind frame when I was in business school was all about these bigger companies and bigger organizations. So the questions were, in your marketing class, what are you supposed to do to get attention, from people? When you get into the world of small business, the question then becomes, how do I get the attention of people who can become my customers, and how can I get them to pay me before I have to pay the radio station?
Okay.
Right. And you have to learn all of this whole new level of strategy and tactics that small business people often have to get involved with that big business people really don't ever think about.
Okay.
And it's, I say really that small business people have to develop a whole different level of survival skills
Mm-hmm.
in order to make things work. Because not only are they trying to figure out, promotion and sales, but they have to be the CFO, they have to be their company's controller a lot of the time, and they have to manage that cash flow, and as well as a bunch of other things. Small businesses often are at a disadvantage when they hire. People want to work for bigger companies, have better benefits and insurance programs and things like this. So there really is a lot that makes it different in the world of small business.
Okay, so you are the small business man and the small business coach. I'm wondering because bigger businesses are out there. They have these locations in every city. So small businesses often find themselves fighting for space in the business world. What are some things that they need to do as they're building, as they're growing, as they're setting their foundation, that they can remain relevant, viable, profitable in this world, because they're fighting these bigger people, bigger budgets, bigger advertising. So how do they do that?
Well, most of my experience is with helping people buy and sell. And so when you're thinking about selling your business, why would someone want to buy your small business? Why wouldn't they, do something else or go get a job or what have you? The key is the cash flow. And
Okay.
so how do we create the consistent cash flow in the small business, again, in this competitive environment where you're competing against bigger companies? It's by focusing on what you can do that they really can't. And that is, in my opinion, the relationships, right?
Okay.
One of the businesses I used to own when I was younger, I had a partner and we had a truck and we used to go do junk removal. And this was 15 years ago. And we competed against a large international franchise brand. And if you called their phone number, you went to a big call center.
Okay.
Right. And so people would call us up and they would ask us questions. And because we knew the city and we knew where they were and what they were talking about, we often were able to clearly communicate over the phone, a realistic terms of how we could help them and if we could squeeze somebody in the middle of the workday or whatnot. Whereas our competitor, every time the phone rang, a different person answered it. None of them knew the city, and it became very clear that people were dealing with a very big corporate kind of entity. And we heard that on the street when people were talking with us. They would say, we called the other guy and they said they couldn't come to us, until next week. And that's because they just use these standard blocks of time in their
Yeah.
calendar, right? They don't really understand that, hey, it's on the way. We can just stop and help those people as we go.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm kind of hearing the mumbling in society that I think we've gotten too big in some of the businesses, but a lot of people are preferring the more intimate small business experience now. And there might be a shift that we see over the years, but it just seems like we've gotten too big in certain aspects of life.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you. There is something great about going into a local business or, even if it's an online business, but it serves a very intimate community, right? And you can actually make a connection with that person, even if it's virtual, where it's a one-on-one kind of thing and they get to know you.
Mhm.
And you know what, eventually, there's this thing in marketing where we say that people buy things from people they know, like, and trust, right? And bigger that transaction, the more there has to be that liking and trusting and knowing. And if you're always dealing with the same people all the time, it's easier to get to know those people. And really, there's sort of that cliche of the small town shopkeeper who knows all of his neighbors and they're all his customers.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're all friends, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
And that person is running that business to help their neighbors with their problem, whatever it is, either getting the groceries they need, having their shoes repaired, tires fixed, whatever.
Yeah, it's all a community kind of feel to it. Like I said, I just really, I'm out there paying attention to the direction. I really think that is where people are going and gravitating to. Now, I want to talk about, because you mentioned it, and I want to make sure I touch on it, because it's something that personally I struggle with. You talk about building a business that you can sell later on. And I know a lot of times when entrepreneurs start a business, that is your child, that is your baby. Like, this is going to be with me forever and ever. But we really should consider exit strategy. We should really consider, like, there might be a point in time where we need to sell this business. So how do we I guess first let go of our egos to say this is not this might be something that you don't keep forever, but how do we set up things so that we can sell it?
Well, the very first thing is to understand that at some point in time, everyone exits. We all have an expiry date of one form or another,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so once you realize that even given your own mortality, there will be a time when you will not be running that business.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is an absolute true, statement, then what should we be thinking about? A lot of businesses will never be sold. A lot of them will simply be closed up. Some will be handed off to family members, etc. But here's the idea I want to plant in your head. If someone were going to come along and buy your business, what they would find attractive is good earnings, and they would find it attractive that you were organized and had systems in place so that they could clearly see how you run the business, so that they could understand that they would be able to take it over, right? That would be attractive. Now,
Okay.
if you had such a business that had higher earnings and was better organized and easier to run, wouldn't it make your everyday easier as an owner? Right?
True. True.
So what I say to people is, if you plan that you want to create your business into something that could be sold, you will actually end up with a better business. And you'll end up with all of the advantages that those improvements are going to create. So working on maximizing your earnings, it's going to be better for you. You're going to have more money. Putting systems in place that allow people to see clearly how things are done means that you don't have to be micromanaging your team members as much. And when you get older, it makes the idea of semi-retirement or easing back the hours a possibility. You don't even have to necessarily sell. But one of the things that I've had to talk with many business owners about is that if you found out what most small businesses sell for, you would in fact not be excited at all. Businesses are quite risky, and as a result of that risk, they sell for quite a low figure proportionate to their cash flow. Okay. And a lot of the stuff you'll read online will talk about bigger businesses and what they sell for and what they're worth. And it doesn't quite translate into the world of small businesses.
Okay.
So people don't build a business with the idea of cashing out. People usually own and run a small business because they need an income, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the breadwinning tool that allows them to support their family. And so a good business really only ever gets put on the market to be sold when some kind of pressing personal concern happens on the part of the owner that forces them to need to sell.
Okay.
And the top five that I see consistently, number one is burnout and fatigue, right?
Okay.
And so they run themselves ragged. They don't have those systems in place. They're working 70 hours a week. They never take a vacation. One day they're going to wake up and say, I don't want to do this anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's your burnout. There's divorce. There's poor health. The need to relocate is one that's happening more and more often. So you could have a successful business and your spouse might have a high paid career and they earn more than you. And if they have an opportunity to transfer within their employment to another city, that business is going to be put up for sale because you're probably going to follow the higher income, right?
Sure.
Stay together as a couple. And then the last one is retirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And the kids probably don't want to take over the business.
Well, to that point, let me address that because, people often have this idea that they'll pass the business on to their kids. And the most valuable businesses are the successful ones, the ones that earn money. And what you see a lot of is if somebody has a successful small business and they earn good money, one of the things they typically invest in is in their children's education.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you've got the dry cleaner owner who's getting older, who wants to know if his kids are going to retire. And one of them's an attorney and one of them's an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
They're not coming back to run the dry cleaner.
Not going to happen, Pops. Not going to happen.
Right?
That's so true. You're like, okay, you want to give up the attorney gig to clean some clothes? I don't think so, Dad. Understandable. So I suppose on the flip, so we're talking about me and my little precious ego wanting to hold on to my business. But for the person who is considering buying a business, all those things that you mentioned are also the factors that you look at when you're trying to buy a business as well, right? If it's profitable.
Yeah. In a lot of the work that I do to teach people about this idea, I draw a line between the entrepreneur and the investor.
Okay.
because they have very different motivations. So your entrepreneur has a vision for the future. They can envision a business they'd like to have. They work hard to build it. If it's not working, they pivot or adjust things, and they'll put everything into it to try to make it work. And then if it does work, eventually they'll hit a break-even point, and then they'll start to earn some money.
Mm-hmm.
The person who buys a business, they don't want to do that. That's why they want to buy a business. They have an investment mentality. So their question is, if I give you this money I've saved up or accumulated, what do I then get in return? It's much more like the conversation you have with, someone who advises you on buying mutual funds or something,
Mm-hmm.
right? What money do I put in, and what kind of rate of return am I expected to get? And so sometimes those two people, they have a hard time talking with each other, because the person who started the business believes that they've worked all those years for very little to build it up to that point of profitability. And now's the time when they're going to get compensated for all that sweat equity they put in. And the person on the other side of the table is saying, well, you know what? You've got a certain profit in your business. I'm willing to buy that. It doesn't matter to me how you got here.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you have to sell. And I find that the mentality about looking at the business like an asset is much easier for people who buy and then they are getting ready to sell. One of the questions that I always say that business buyers should ask is they should ask a business owner, how did you get into this business? Did you start it, inherit it, or buy it?
Okay.
And if someone says they bought it, that's awesome, because it's easier for that business owner to empathize with your position as a business buyer. And when people have that strong attachment, it can lead to some poor decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people get into a business, things go well, they make some money, and then something happens and that things start to turn down a bit, and then they start putting money into it because they think that it's going to recover, and eventually the business ends up consuming their wealth instead of adding to their wealth.
Okay.
And when I talk with these people, one of the big reasons that they don't pull the plug and kind of cut things off and walk away when they're ahead is that they feel that, there's not much of a differentiator between the business and them. And if the business fails, everyone's going to think they're a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing can be further from the truth. To tell people I shut down my business because it wasn't making any money, it wasn't serving me anymore, that is a powerful statement of being in control.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I've met other business people who had different enterprises throughout their life, and they'll start different ones, and one of them doesn't work. They just shut it down. And when you ask them, you say, yep, it wasn't doing its job. It wasn't being an asset for me.
Okay.
And that's what the business is supposed to do. It's supposed to put money in your pocket so you can support your family and achieve your other goals.
So one of the things that you mentioned was the difference between business and investing. And I also read about you that a part of what you have done or do is real estate investment. And I know here in America, like that is the big push, the big plug to building wealth is you got to own some property. You got to get some real estate. You got to get some real estate. Why exactly is it that real estate is a viable opportunity when it comes to building your wealth?
Well, real estate has a couple of great advantages, but just, for full disclosure, investment property, the value of property has an inverse relationship with interest rates. So when interest rates are high, the value of property is low. And as interest rates come down, the value of property goes up. And the reason for that is that if you can borrow money cheaper, you can afford to spend more on the property because your payments are going to be lower with that lower interest rate. So I started buying properties back in 01, 02, 03, and interest
right before the bubble.
Well, it was after the tech boom, but before the prices started to run up.
Okay.
And what was happening is that when the recession of the tech boom came, they started to cut interest rates. And so the prices of the buildings were coming up, just as you said, the bubble was starting to happen. And then as interest rates got to the lowest point possible, as far as I was concerned, buildings were selling for crazy money. Like I had models that I'd built in Excel where I would evaluate a property, and my realtor was calling me saying, look, David, if we sell that 4-unit you have, we can probably get this amount of money. And I'd put that figure into my calculation. And I would say, there's no way anyone can pay that amount and make any money on the building.
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous. So I sold them all
Okay.
and
Okay.
took those capital gains.
Okay.
And about a year ago, I started to look again. And of course, every market is different. And the place where I live, prices don't really move a lot up and down.
Okay.
And for the past 10 years, prices came down and then just kind of got stuck.
Okay.
And so I'm looking at different things, but the other neat thing that I do that people often find is kind of cool. Before I was a business broker, I was a finance broker for small businesses. And what I did is I started learning from the banks who do loans and from leasing companies who lease equipment. I started to see how they protect themselves in their paperwork and how if they make a loan for something, they'll use it as collateral and not lend the full value of that item and things like this. So I actually developed a way for me to invest in small businesses without being the owner by doing
Okay.
some of these finance deals. So I've leased vehicles. I've lent people money for inventory. I've lent people money to buy equipment in their small business, etc. And I've earned a great rate of return. The small businesses profited because they either were renting equipment on a job by job basis and now they were able to own with a lower payment, or they were able to access capital they couldn't before, or they were able to do it without affecting the owner's credit score. And so that's part of the stuff that I do too. I wrote a
Okay.
book about that back in 2014.
Yeah, you have a large collection of books. I was reading. How many books do you have out?
There are 7 out. The 8th is coming out this fall. And one of the biggest decisions I made that has turned out to be very fruitful is last winter, I promised myself I would record them all for audio.
Oh,
And
awesome. Okay.
since they've come out on audio, I'm really surprised. It's definitely popular. People are trying to turn that commute time into learning time.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so we should be expecting the audio when?
So my new book is called Smarter Than a Startup, and it's all about the misfortunes that people get into when they decide to start a business from scratch, and how what I show in the book is how they can achieve their dream business through a different kind of tactic that will be much less risky.
Okay.
And that's what the book is about, and it's coming out October 18th. The pre-sale's on Amazon already.
Okay. So, Mr. Man of the Hour, let's say you have let's say you have a gentleman who comes to you and says, David, I want to open up a weight shop, a weight equipment. I don't know. What should I do first?
What you mean, like to sell gym equipment or something?
Yes, to sell gym equipment. There you go. I had a brain fart there.
The first thing I would do is I would go and meet the owners of every other similar type of business in the market to see if any of them want to sell.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And this is the surprising thing to most people. Most people see businesses from the street as an outsider, and they make assumptions that can be entirely incorrect. Did you have a big boom in frozen yogurt where you live?
For a minute there, back when I was in college, yeah, it was like on every corner. Yeah.
Yeah. We had that here about 6-7 years ago.
Uh-huh.
One place opened and there were lineups, and then within 2 years there were like 8 of them.
Yes.
Right? And everyone's like, wow, there must be a lot of money in frozen yogurt. Look at all these places. And then more of them started to open. And by that time, we got to the end of the first people's lease, and then they started to close. Right? And this is what people don't understand is if you have a business in a leased location, chances are you signed a 5-year lease. It's the most popular commercial lease term. And in all likelihood, the owner of the business had to personally guarantee that lease. So if you get into a situation where you're not making money, if you close the store, the landlord could sue you for the balance of the payments on the lease, right? And so if you've got other wealth and resources, a home, et cetera, that you could lose, it doesn't make sense to do that. So sometimes people will run these businesses and they're not making any money. They may even be losing a little bit of money, but keeping it open is still a better choice than closing it and facing the legal risks involved with breaking the lease.
Okay.
And so, one of the books I wrote, Franchise Warnings, the franchise industry loves to put out the statistic about how many locations are still open after 5 years. And what I tell people to do is you want to figure out how many are open after 6.
Okay.
Because they've come to the end of their lease.
Yeah.
And it's when the lease expires that the risk disappears. And that's when people can tell the landlord, look, we're not going to renew, and we'll remove all of our equipment and we'll be out on the last day. And then they can escape and try to recover in some other way. And
Yeah,
so you might think that there's a good opportunity in a certain industry because of what you see, but if you go and meet the people and start to learn more about it, you might see that maybe they're not doing as well as you think.
okay. Yeah, the phenomenon that you're talking about, I think I read about a couple of years ago. Here in some cities, there are a lot of empty shopping plazas, empty shopping malls, and it's like, why are they just there still? But people were caught up in their leases, and they were still paying their leases, even though they were not there and they were not operating. But a lot of businesses, just went left, but they're still paying their leases. So yeah, that's a intriguing thought process there. Now I want to ask you about one of your titles, because I want to know exactly what it is, first of all.
Sure.
You are a private transaction advisor. What do you do?
Well, so that's the biggest part of my day-to-day consulting work. So
Okay.
I used to have a business brokerage office, and when you're a business broker, you have an agency role with the owner of a business. They hire you to sell their business, and you represent them. And usually there's an exclusive contract between the two of you. And I did that for years. I used to own a business brokerage office. In 3 years, I sold 36 businesses for other people. But it's a crazy business, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. And here's why. You sometimes work 2 or 3 years on a deal before it closes. And sometimes you work 2 or 3 years on a deal and it never does close. So the cash flow is a roller coaster. You can have a commission check for $100,000 come through the door and then not have any more revenue for 5 months, right?
Wow.
And so I went through this for 3 years and I was very successful. I sold a lot of businesses. I also went through a 9-month dry spell in 1 year. And so when you see the bank balances go down to zero and then go into the red and then go down, and 5 figures in the red, you start to worry, and then you sell something, it doesn't earn you a lot of money, it just fills in the holes, right? And so it's a stressful kind of lifestyle. And I eventually left the industry. I took a job with a bank. And when I was working with the bank, my cell phone kept going off and people were saying, Dave, I was given your name. I'm trying to buy this business, or I'm trying to sell this business. Can you help me? And I would tell those people no. I would say, I'm not a business broker anymore. And then one day, this fella named Bob called me up and he said, Dave, I just really need your help. And I said, Bob, I have a full-time job. I can't really work with you. I'm not a broker. I guess I could be a consultant. I have to charge you an hourly rate, and it's going to be on evenings or weekends. And he said, great. Where do you live? I'll come there Saturday morning.
Awesome. Okay.
And that was the very first time I helped somebody as a consultant instead of a broker, and I didn't have that agency relationship.
Okay.
And so today I work with buyers and sellers, helping them buy and sell businesses, but I don't have that agency relationship. I charge them for what I do in much the same way that an attorney or a CPA, the CPA helps you with the tax return, he charges you for that. He prepares your financial statements, he charges you for that. And the same with an attorney, they do a contract for you, they bill you, and that's how I operate. And it means that I get to use all the knowledge and skill that I acquired as a business broker, but I don't have that roller coaster cash flow anymore. And I get to issue invoices to my clients every week as I do things. And on the flip side, my clients aren't paying a huge chunk of the value of their business when they sell, 10, 12%. They're just paying me for the service I give them along the way. So it's a new kind of business model with a familiar kind of service, and it works well for both sides, but I'm not really a broker. So I coined the term private transaction advisor.
Okay.
Because I think that summarizes what I do.
Oh, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so today, does David see himself taking on more business ventures, doing different things?
Well, it's funny because whenever somebody gets into business or wants to buy a business, I think one of the first questions they have to ask themselves is, what is your ideal life situation? And for me, a few years ago, I was working for the bank. People were calling me. I could see that there might be an opportunity to develop this into a business. And one of the big drivers in my life is my dedication to my kids. I want to make sure I can do everything I can for them. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if my children didn't have to go to daycare? And so my business runs from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. So a couple blocks from the school, the kids come home after school, and I get to spend time with them. They don't have to go to daycare.
Awesome.
And to me, that's an important thing. My oldest is about to become a teenager. So what's happening now is, of course, I'm here waiting for them, and they're like, they don't want to hang out with me anymore. Right? So as we move along and I get more of my time back for my own pursuits, then I think that's in the cards.
Okay. So I'm going to do my random question, and then we're going to ask you how people get in touch with you, and then we're going to get out of here because I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Is it really random, like from a fishbowl? Oh, okay. All right. I'm ready. I'm good.
You're ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh. If you could pick one celebrity to have lunch or dinner with, who would it be? One
celebrity to have lunch or dinner with? Well, it's got to be Donald Trump, right? All I would ask him is if he really believes the stuff he tweets, or if it's all just for the media. Is it all just for us to get excited about, right?
I think it's for show. I think it's a lot of show. Awesome. All righty, David. So tell everybody, how do they pick up your books? How do they connect with you? I mean, just give us all the deal.
Yeah, sure. The central hub of everything I do online is at davidcbarnett.com. It's my blog site, and there are tabs there. So if you want to learn about my online courses or my different websites for buying or selling businesses and my different books, it's all on there. And the books are all on Amazon as well. So davidcbarnett.com is the place to come. And if you are interested in business deals, when you're there, sign up for my email list. And I send out emails every day, but you get to pick which topics you're interested in.
Okay.
So you just get stuff that it relates to what you are curious about.
Okay. And the online courses, we didn't get to talk about that, but that's a great tool there. So everybody check him out. I just had a pleasure talking to you today. And my daughter's 24, so I'm going to pray for you through those teenage years, because that's a really tough time. That's a really tough time.
Thank you, Lana. I'll take all the luck I can get.
All right. You have a good one. Thank you for hanging out with me today. That's the conclusion of this episode of The Male Perspective. I will see everybody next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.